The King of the Battlefield Chapter 81. Chapter 81, Star of the Absolute, 6. TL, Yoni. Editor, Empty Cube. Arc trolls were mutant species. Their white skin made people think of albinos. Also, mutant species could never mix into their group. Normally, mutant species were abandoned and would die in the wild, but due to certain circumstances, a very few of them survived. And those mutant species that survived possessed a stronger strength than their counterparts. It was the result of their struggles. One was able to exhibit the power of more than 5. On top of that, there were times when monsters with arc in their names had strengthened inherent abilities besides their resistance to darkness and light. And trolls were typically a race that possessed outstanding stamina recovery. What we are seeing now isn't a dream, right? Bug blankly opened his mouth, with an expression as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The rest of his comrades' expression weren't greatly different from his. He outran Arc Troll's stamina recovery ability. Can a Dakibi, who isn't even a Duoxini, be that strong? An Arc Troll was able to instantly recover after being cut or pierced. If he was burned, it ripped that part off and continued to recover. It was literally an astonishing stamina recovery ability. However, Muyong, who was facing the Arc Troll, was more astonishing. At first, Bug thought he was a somewhat special Dakibi. Although he had a horn, and even if he was a king, since he wasn't a Duoxini, his fighting ability shouldn't have been greatly different. However, his perception of him shattered after he began to fight in the arena. Repeated victories. After the appearance of Olonus, Muyong instantly became a star in the arena. And he now showed strength far greater than a Duoxini and captivated his audience. Blaze. The flames that soared from Muyong's back damaged the entire arena. He swung his 2 swords and sliced off the Arc Troll's body as if he was carving a sculpture. This meant that the power he had shown until now wasn't even the tip of the iceberg. The Arc Troll was unable to resist him once. Or is the Arc Troll just weak? The priest replied as the girl in charge of the archer position asked. No, that Dakibi is just stronger than what we imagined. Usually, people say Arc Troll could exhibit the power of 10 trolls, but I'm not sure. It was true. Arc Trolls were never weak. He was just strong. Bug's whole body shivered. Muyong possessed a keen insight that could identify his true character, the strength to back it up, and even the meticulousness to plan ahead. He turned his head to look at the undead. I never heard of Dakibis that could manipulate death. Gulp. Bug felt like his saliva was drying up. Sword and magic, on top of that, he could manipulate death. He never heard of a monster that could use various of different skills. If there was. Human. Only humans could use strength in so many different ways like him. Buer. As he thought that, his whole body shivered again. Is he really not a Dakibi but a human? He could appear as a Dakibi as an effect of a skill. Bug saw through him accurately but became even more confused. At that moment, the fight ended. The fight ended and the arena became quiet. It was because he ended the fight by one-sidedly by showing strength equal to, or possibly greater, than Olonus. Thump. Thump. In the narrow hallway, he walked towards him. The sound of his footsteps seemed especially louder. Are you really a Dakibi? Bug couldn't help but ask. Muyong's eyes turned towards him and, at the same time, he felt a chilling feeling piercing through his body. However, this question was quite important. Human or Dakibi? If he was a human, he needed to act more carefully. Soul language users received attention wherever they went, and since he, a dragon language user, was a level higher than them, it would only lead to a bigger commotion. The world wasn't that easy. People who tried to use others were widespread. However, if someone other than his comrades were to know this truth? In Bug's position, it was a matter of life and death. Muyong slowly opened his lips. I'm The ruler of Dakaibis and the companion of souls. I'm even a lord who rules over quite a big territory. Then, he shoved the still-beating Arc Troll's heart he held in his hand into where Heidegger's heart would normally be located. It was a completely strange scene, but Myung didn't even bat an eye. Tips of Myung's lips slightly curved upwards. Afterwards, Myung looked at Bug. I understand what your worries are. However, this much caution was something any explorer should have. As Bug looked at him with doubt, he continued to talk. Your worries won't come true. The ritual of order bless. I will start right away. You're wise. He picked things up quickly. He quickly understood what Myung wanted to say. It was obvious as his main weapon were words. Olonus is my prey. Awaiting his death will also be amusing. Myung spoke confidently before he walked away. 20 fights 20 wins. A bounty was placed on Myung, who has won continuously. Victor effect has been added. Victor is a qualification that allows you to take away an opponent's continuous victory. It is only activated when the opponent dies. Fight with your victory on the line. Myung immediately went down to the next floor. When he entered the third floor, the number of monsters were a lot less than before. Normally, if they were able to reach the third floor, it was because they had gathered 1,000,000 ons and left the arena. At the very least, there weren't many monsters that were obsessed with obtaining an escape ticket. However, while the numbers were small, they didn't lack strong individuals in the arena. Every monster was starving to fight, and fighting was their only goal. Of course, there wasn't a better battleground to activate the Victor effect. There was also an unexpected change. That 2 undead were added as warriors in the arena. It all happened so naturally. So that no one could realize that Myung was their owner, he made them act like others. Sure enough. He was half in doubt, but his plan was successful. However, even if the undead won, the victory did not go to Myung. They measured the outcome differently. It was better this way. If they were measured together, it would mean that their wins and loss would also be together. If they were to lose even once, the record of his continuous wins would all go to waste. Anyhow, Myung was planning on using Black Sun Warrior and Heidegger to hold Olonus back. The source of Olonus' strength was very similar to Myung. Of course, their weakness would also be similar. While Order Bless is in effect, Olonus' attacks won't work. At least, he could say that Spectre-type skills would be useless. He couldn't do anything about physical attacks, but Black Sun Warrior and Heidegger's endurance were formidable without a doubt. And Olonus' physical attacks weren't that strong. It seemed strong because he strengthened them with the strength of specters. If they were to fight, it was possible to continuously drain his stamina. Slash! Myung swung his 2 swords. At the same time, the hairy abominable snowman's head fell to the floor. The rank of Sword Master skill went up. Fe. Sword Master. Like the title, it was a skill that allowed him to become the master of his swords as it increased in rank. Myung was trained to be able to use all the weapons, but he was far from having a deep understanding of them. However, after learning the Sword Master skill, for the first time he was able to question about what was a sword. On top of that, his understanding of swords and skills had also increased. I'm not going to stop. Myung was naturally getting stronger. His development speed was ridiculous, however, that didn't mean he wasn't devoted to the basics. It would have been impossible if he was his past self. Even the strong individuals who were known as world-class geniuses couldn't have developed as fast as Myung. However, Myung didn't doubt his growth. It was because he knew that his growth would stagnate the moment he doubted it. Not long until 10 million ons. The betting ratio was continuously getting lower. However, once he collected 10 million ons, he would have basically achieved his first goal. Cerberus. The gatekeeper of the last gateway. To attack Cerberus, he needed 3 things. One of which was a special incense that could be purchased with 10 million ons. Since the fight with Olonus wasn't everything, he needed to prepare ahead. Even if the level of arena increased, Olonis and Muyung were like two running horses. No monster could stop the two. As if they made a promise, the two ran forward, only looking ahead. However, that all ended on the next floor. As if Muyung had been waiting for this moment, he chose Olonis. Olonis had already used a lot of stamina fighting Black Sun Warrior and Heidegger. His mind and body had become exhausted from the appearance of new foes. Now was his chance to strike him from the rear when he least expected it. Olonis had a strange expression on his face as if he didn't expect to be chosen yet. I think I said this wasn't the place you and I were going to fight. I choose the place I fight. There was no reason for him to follow Olonis' intentions. And it wasn't like Muyung to lose his most advantageous chance. On the other hand, Olonis fought continuously because he was planning to fight him on the first floor. He didn't even think about saving his stamina. Especially since Black Sun Warrior and Heidegger held him back, his spectre strength was significantly weakened. You think well for someone related to Gremory. Muyung chuckled. He thought Olonis would denounce him for being a coward, but it was the opposite. In a battlefield where people had to kill one another, one must do whatever it took to win. Since Olonis was also the same, he was taken back but wasn't angry at Muyung. A devil wasn't just a devil for no reason. He's not easy to provoke. Olonis wasn't the type to be provoked easily. The more he was provoked, the clearer his mind would become. Instead of provoking him, it was better to just show his skills. Muyung slowly unsheathed Anguish and his wicked god's sword. And while looking at Muyung, Olonis coldly said, "Ah, I will make you regret your decision." "I never regret my decisions." Muyung instantly replied. Olonis didn't know what kind of life Muyung had lived. And what an amazing happiness it was to be able to make your own choices. How far he had come compared to his past where his right to make his own choices had been revoked. How could he regret his own decisions? At least, since returning to the past, Muyung had never regretted a single decision he had made. He always did his best to produce the best results. It was the same right now. Swung. Anguish and Wicked God's sword rang fiercely. Chapter 82, Star of the Absolute, 7. TL, Yoni. Editor, Obelisk. Olonis' expression hardened right away. He instantly opened his third eye and got ready to attack Muyung. He also realized that he could instantly get attacked if he was to engage half-heartedly. Olonis raised his hand as he opened his eye halfway. Numerous hands appeared from the floor to hold Muyung back, but it was useless. Blaze. The flames that soared from his whole body refused the hands of the specters. The cry of fire had the basic property of rejecting darkness. Shadow teleportation and acceleration. And Muyung knew that Olonis became defenseless when he summoned his hands. Using shadow teleportation, he moved behind Olonis and used acceleration on Hermes's boots. Duration 3 seconds. Olonis' eyes moved and detected Muyung, but he was too slow. Anguish moved first and sliced through Olonis' shoulder. However, the Wicked God's sword missed. It was because Olonis instinctively twisted his body after receiving a blow. At the same time, a small beam shot out in a straight line from his third eye. Clash! A wall on the side of the arena was destroyed. Muyung, who dangerously avoided his attack, rolled on the floor before he got up. "My eye can read everything. It seems like you can't use that attack twice, it must be disappointing." Olonis mocked him as he held his half-amputated left shoulder. As if Muyung wasted his first and last chance. Olonis wasn't completely wrong. However, Muyung wasn't disappointed at all. "It's enough." The injury Anguish caused was hard to recover. The truth was that Olonis' injury wasn't recovering. Vitality was spurting out and was continuously being absorbed into Muyung. From the beginning, Muyung was just after wounding him first. It will be a long fight. It was fight he needed to fight for the long run. Muyung and Olonis' skills weren't that greatly different. However, Olonus was quite exhausted and allowed Myung to attack him. All that was left was time. The time for him to collapse. Thump. Rumble. As Olonus fiercely attacked Myung with his long nails, Myung calmly blocked his attacks and summoned Murdyudun. Stop his movements. Murloc King Murdyudun appeared with a few thousand spectres. After Myung ordered him, Murdyudun ground his teeth as he looked at Olonus. Devil. The one that I hate most. After being tricked by demon god Dantalion, Murdyudun harbored a strong hatred against demons and demon gods alike. Even if he was a slave, there was no way for Devil Olonus to look good in Murdyudun's eyes. Instantly, under Murdyudun's command, thousands of spectres restricted Olonus' movements. Kaya. Olonus bit his lips as his movement instantly became dull and his body didn't listen to him. The third eye opened halfway and started to indiscriminately shoot out beams. Thump. Thump. Crash. No one can stop me. His eye became redder. Small veins bulged and his whole body slowly bloated up. All the hands that originally rose from the floor were absorbed into Olonus' body. In time, huge horns appeared on both sides of his forehead and wings sprouted from his back. Form of the devil. That was his true devil form. They would normally go around in similar forms to other species, but when they began to fight, they would sometimes transform like this. And devils who changed into a form of a devil earned destructive power beyond one's imaginations. Of course, not all devils could change into their true form. Only a few chosen devils could have a true form, and Olonus seemed to be one of those chosen devils. He can't maintain it for long. However, there weren't many devils who could maintain the form of the devil for a long time. Unless they were a demon king or a demon god, at most they could maintain it for about 10 minutes. When the change is lifted, the rebound will also be big. It meant that Myung could win if he killed time. The problem was that it was really hard to endure for that period of time. Olonus, who finished transforming into the form of the devil, let out his breath and spoke. I will kill you most painfully. You shouldn't have offended me. Olonus fluttered his wings and declared to Myung. Myung took a big breath. Thump. When he closed his eyes and reopened them, something deep inside Azurapath responded. His heart beat violently. Azurapath wants his body. It was unexpected. However, something in Azurapath wanted the current Olonus form. Myung instinctively knew that this something was one of the rulers of Azurapath. Do you want him? Thump. 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 Myung's whole body shivered. A supremely evil spirit that wanted the form of the devil was slowly opening its eyes. Evil spirit predator. Myung had already conquered a significant part of Azurapath by using Murdyudun, and when a special condition was added, the evil spirit predator seemed to have awakened and acknowledged Myung. I will accept. Myung nodded his head. At the same time, Blaaz. The few thousands of spectres Myung released, all gathered inside his body. This strength, isn't it the strength of the predator? Murdyudun's eyes widened. Murdyudun also knew of the few sovereigns in Azurapath. However, it seemed like he never in the world expected that one of them would lend Myung their strength. Soon, a skull-shaped spirit was casted behind Myung's back. The old dwarf Kalmu couldn't take his eyes off the fight for even a second. While placing his hands together, he concentrated all his nerves on Myung and Olonus' fight. I can't believe it. He used acceleration. Beside Kalmu, the 4 humans, including Bug, were with him. They were also able to reach the second floor by winning on a roll, but the reason why they continued even though they could leave the arena was only to watch this fight. They were curious as to how well Myung was going to fight against Olonus, who sliced off their comrade's arm. But, as the fight began, Myung used acceleration to successfully injuring Olonus. Please, please. Kalmu felt his helplessness as he could only pray. However, it was true that he felt an odd pleasure whenever Myung pressed Olonus with the equipment he touched upon. Sun's revenge. If he could kill Olonus, he would do anything. Ah! However, Kalmu strongly bit his lips after seeing Olonus transform into the form of the devil. He never thought Olonus was a devil that had the form. Normally, it was only possible for high-ranked devils. Even though Olonus' skills were exceptional, Kalmu couldn't say he was a high rank. That was why he didn't even think about it. If he was transformed, Muyoung's winning ratio would drastically decrease. When they were finally able to fight on an equal level, the tables were turned at once. Crushed to death. Even if the duration was short, it was still possible to crush his opponent as long as a gap was created. Unless Olonus was an idiot, he would try to end the fight as quickly as he could. And Muyoung didn't have any moves to stop him. Everyone thought that. Withdraw. I can feel the strong strength of a curse. The priest spoke. Afterwards, he kneeled and repeated the name of Sun. As a cloud was summoned and surrounded the people around them, a strong curse blew out in waves with Muyoung at the center. Thuump. Thuump. A half-transparent and enormous skull soared up behind Muyoung. Very quickly, a few monsters that were watching the fight from the stand collapsed onto the floor. They were unable to withstand the aftermath of the curse. What exactly is that skull? Bug asked the priest. The priest barely answered while he was dripping with sweat. I'm not sure. However, I am certain that it is a denied existence that should not exist in this world. Something that normally has to be sealed in abyss. The abyss. It's a place where the gods seal up evil spirits. Ha, even when he's not completely exposed, he still has this much presence. I'm truly curious as to how a Dakibi is able to draw out that sort of evil spirit from the abyss. The eyes of the priest were shaking as it looked at the evil spirit predator. An existence inside the abyss was awakened. The Dakibi woke it. On top of that, the existence from the abyss was now helping the Dakibi. Something unbelievable was happening. Evil spirits locked in the abyss hated and wanted to destroy everything. Help? They didn't have that kind of sense. That was why they were sealed by the gods. Thump. Olonus and Muyoung collided. However, whoever watched them could tell Olonus' urgency from his movements. Muyoung didn't yield an inch. It seemed like he was at a disadvantage for a second, but they were back to being equal opponents. However, Olonus' movements resembled a frantic last-ditch effort. That was also the final struggle dependent on time. And after 10 minutes had passed, the form of the devil was lifted and Olonus returned to his original state. What are hell are you? A strength that my eye can't read, it's not possible. Olonus shouted. Muyoung lifted his hand with an emotionless face. Stab. Anguish pierced Olonus' heart. As Muyoung took out anguish, Olonus' body drooped. However, it wasn't the end yet. At the same time, tears of blood suddenly started to pour from Olonus' third eye. Self-destruction. As he knitted his brows, the evil spirit predator acted faster than Muyoung. As it approached, permeating into Olonus' body, bloody tears stopped flowing down his third eye. Thud. With a small explosive, Olonus lowered his head. However, it seemed like it was late. The brain self-exploded. Tisk. He clicked his tongue lightly. Like this, even if he was to make an undead, he couldn't collect the information he wanted. The situation with the demon gods factions and Gremory's position, there were so many things he wanted to ask, but before he had the chance, the situation had ended. As he turned his head, the evil spirit predator looked down on Muyoung. You want me to use the art of death skill? Even if it stopped his self-destruction, it seemed like it couldn't force itself into the body and take control of it. Muyoung nodded his head and used the art of death skill. At that moment, the evil spirit predator was absorbed into Olonus' body. Level, 350. Type, Death Knight. Strength 380, Agility 365. Stamina 338, Intelligence 210. Wisdom 249, Magic Resistance 300. Plus completely autonomic individual, does not listen to orders. Plus boundless development, it develops on its own. Plus qualification to be a sovereign, it can have its own territory and order soldiers. A black cape fluttered as it held a thick long sword. Myung could only be greatly surprised by the finished product. A Death Knight. It was a top-class undead that even liches only had one of. The evil spirit predator that occupied Olonus' body looked at Myung. Do you want anything? He felt as though it was asking him this. Cerberus. Only one thing came to Myung's mind. He believed it was best to prepare the 3 things needed and put Cerberus to sleep, but if the Death Knight appeared, the story changed. Something no one could challenge. It seemed possible to even hunt the Cerberus. Chapter 83, Star of the Absolute, End. TL, Yoni. Editor, Obelisk. That wasn't the end. The art of death skill, that stagnated after it had reached C rank, rose a rank. By having one of the sovereigns of Azura Path come out, the conquest rate greatly increased. However, there was definitely something strange. Even though he used the art of death skill to create him, orders didn't work on it. It was also surprising that he could develop on his own and become a sovereign. However, although he might have had a slight goodwill towards Myung, he didn't seem like he would forever follow him. A king is an independent entity. As if he answered Myung's question, the evil spirit predator spoke. Now that he looked at him, it seemed like he could talk. I do thank you for releasing me. In return, I will help you with one thing. However, you cannot tie me down. It meant that he wasn't planning to follow him from the beginning. Simply looking at their stats, the level difference between the evil spirit predator and Myung was like the difference between heaven and earth. It would be illogical to attack. Even if Myung had a lot of experience and avoided a face-to-face confrontation with him, he wouldn't be able to do anything. However, the evil spirit predator knew one thing but not the other. He didn't seem to know that Myung held his life in the palm of his hand. Since he had earned a physical body in this life through Myung, the black soul appeared above the evil spirit predator. It was an indicator that soul exploitation was possible. I don't need an undead that doesn't follow me. As Myung coldly spoke, the evil spirit predator smashed the ground once with his sword. Then, what are you going to do? A king doesn't follow anyone. I have escaped the abyss and am now going to be a king in this world. He consistently showed a domineering attitude as if he was weary of Myung. Myung stretched his hand. As he held the black soul in his hand, the expression of the evil spirit predator hardened. Wait. How can a human see my soul and hold it? If I want to, I can get rid of it. Impossible. Unless your soul is a higher rank than mine, it would be impossible. We can check if it is impossible or not. He was a bit curious. If he were to exploit the soul of an undead at the level of a death knight, how fast would his development be? The evil spirit predator became serious. Something that couldn't happen transpired almost naturally. A sovereign that ruled over a few thousand specters. There was no way for a human soul to be of a higher level than his soul. However, it was a situation where one challenge could end everything. It meant that the Death Lord's existence was at a level higher than the evil spirit predator, and since soul exploitation was active, if Myung made his mind, he could get rid of evil spirit predator's soul. After realizing this, the evil spirit predator changed his attitude. I will help you. For taking me out of the abyss, I will volunteer to help you for 30 days. He changed his words from a single help to 30 days of volunteering. He did yield a bit in this matter. If Myung was to take advantage of him forever, he would resist from the start. But, it wasn't like he was going to just accept his conditions. Myung shook his head. 90 days. 60 days. No longer than that. I need to quickly raise my power as soon as possible. I need to show dignity in order to prove my qualifications to be the sovereign of few thousand souls. It seemed like he had reasons of his own. Muyong decided to accept his offer. If the evil spirit predator was truly planning on becoming a king, it wasn't bad to strengthen his relationship with him. If he could control a top-ranked entity for 60 days, it would be a great help to his development. Since it wasn't like there were any limitations like he had with the Hell Horse. Okay. However, you must listen to what I say. I understand. The evil spirit predator agreed. As Muyong started to move, someone all of a sudden stopped in front of him. Kalmu. With a flushed expression, he came up and alternately looked at Muyong and evil spirit predator. What happened to Olonus? He's dead. However, he is. It's a different soul in charge of Olonus' body. Kalmu's eyes widened. However, he didn't seem to fully believe in this truth. Muyong took out and held Olonus' soul that was absorbed into Azura path. This is Olonus' soul. If you want it, I will give it to you. It would be possible to trap him in some kind of equipment and make him suffer for eternity. Kalmu's gulped his saliva and then spoke. Then, is it possible to free my boy's soul? Free? My boy died by Olonus and is suffering as he can't be freed even after his death. Kalmu's expression seemed desperate. However, Muyong didn't really have a way. After a bit of thought, he moved his gaze to the evil spirit predator who nodded his head. I guess you're talking about the souls that devil guy used as slaves. Find him yourself. The evil spirit predator stomped his foot. Thump. With that sound, the ground split and a few thousand souls from below soared upwards. In time, those souls then took form. With their appearance from when they were alive, with no focus, they stood behind the evil spirit predator. That was the authority of the evil spirit predator. It seemed like he could grant forms to their souls and make them fight. Amazing. Muyong inwardly admired him. The Death Lord's existence might be higher than the evil spirit predator, but Muyong couldn't completely use his strength. For now, he was far behind the evil spirit predator in terms of handling the undead and specters. Kalmu looked around to find his son. How long has it been? Ah! With an exclamation, Kalmu ran. And he wailed in front of a dwarf child. Wah wah wah! Kalamo, my child! Why are you here being all cold? Kalmu held both shoulders of the child and sighed while he kneeled. Your father is at fault. I shouldn't have entered this place even if it was out of curiosity. Think ill of me. Self-blame was mixed in. The evil spirit predator who just watched them started to speak. If you want, I can place his soul in a new body. Kalmu pricked his ears. It was no different than the devil's whisper. However, in time he shook his head. I'm okay. I don't want my child to suffer any more than this. He didn't act irrationally after being blinded by affection. Kalmu would also know that it would be impossible without a price. And it wasn't like his son would come back to life just because his soul was placed inside a new body. A completely different result would appear. Since the soul and body were interlinked, a side effect might appear or an emotionless puppet might be created when a soul was placed inside another body. In sense, Kalmu's current decision was wise. Release him. As Muyong spoke, the evil spirit predator shook his hand. Then, the appearance of the child started to become blurry. The soul returned to the place where it was supposed to be. Kalamo. Kalamo. Thump. A moment later, due to the complete disappearance of the child, Kalmu's body fell to the ground. Muyong suddenly became curious and asked. Do you know where the souls go? No one knows besides the Creator. They say that they are reborn. Reborn. It didn't seem like the evil spirit predator knew the details. I did die. After getting rid of the forest of death, Muyong died once. Afterwards, he traveled back in time, but in this world, there was clearly the existence of souls. After his death, his soul definitely left his body. Although he wasn't self-aware, wouldn't there have been another process for him to return to the past? Muyoung shrugged his shoulders. It was something he couldn't know unless he became a god. After Kalmua blankly stared into the distance, being lost in thought, he regained his mind and walked up to Muyoung. After wiping his tears with his hands, he bit his lips before he spoke. "Thank you. Until I die, I will forever follow you." Fortunately, Kalmua wasn't just suicidal. He was clearly remembering their promise. "Please do." Muyoung nodded his head before leaving the arena. Since he no longer needed a strategy to defeat the Cerberus, it was useless for him to collect more ons. That was why Muyoung used the rest of his ons to get all sorts of slaves. Of course, he had a standard. He only chose the species that had rationality and could use their head. This was how he was able to get close to 2,000 slaves until he became the final winner of the first floor. At the same time, he logged the most wins. 227 wins, 0 draw, 0 loss. It was the result of him stealing the continuous wins from Victor effect. Muyoung, no name, 227 wins. Lucian 201 wins. Ohosuki Yuka 167 wins. Lucian and Ohosuki Yuka. Both were people Muyoung was familiar with. Fighting King Lucian and the Queen of Ninjas, Ohosuki Yuka, there was no way that Muyoung would not know them. Moments later, a different message appeared in front of him. A huge door was behind the first floor arena. Afterwards, the door opened and a huge three-headed monster showed itself. Gweong. Its size was well above 10 m. Each of the three heads had a different ability. Normally, he wouldn't have chosen to fight. However, with the existence of the evil spirit predator, conditions allowed him to fight. It's quite a decent mount. The evil spirit predator looked at the Cerberus and rubbed his chin. Muyoung knitted his eyebrows for a moment before he relented. It's harder to suppress it than to kill it. The trial was made to receive an assessment depending on the context. If he was to suppress it, he would receive a good assessment. Let's begin. Swoosh. Anguish and the wicked god's sword rang. Well, he was very excited as she flapped her wings in the air. Look, look. Well, he said so, right? My husband will take care of ye very thing. Arg. The fat fairy Pant groaned. His first intention was to show Wo-hee a reputable trial to win her heart, but Wo-hee was already in love with another person. That was why he tried to interfere by placing a bounty on his head, but that Dakibi didn't stop and continued to crazily advance. On top of that, he made a death knight and was now attacking Cerberus. Wo-hee. My husband is so amazing. He isn't using the strategy Wo-hee told him and is just attacking it. The strategy you told him. Instantly, Wo-hee realized her mistake and pretended she didn't hear him. Husband. Win. While looking at her, Pant let out a deep sigh. A Dakibi and a fairy could never be a good match, but what could he do when she is already this into him? It didn't seem like there was a way to turn her heart around. That was why he looked at Cerberus with a bit of hope. How could a Dakibi win against a Cerberus? He instead wanted the Dakibi to die in his fight with Cerberus. He believed that Wo-hee would then regain her senses and look at him. However, it was all a mere false hope. Instead of the Dakibi, the death knight that the Dakibi made was the problem. He really did fly around and trample on Cerberus. In the end, he even succeeded in taming Cerberus. Pant. Impossible. Taming works on a Cerberus. Pant let out a scream. It was impossible for a monster like Cerberus to be tamed. However, that Death Knight succeeded. The Death Knight got on Cerberus's back and started to use it however he wanted. The natural ability of the Death Knight to find a mount and the authority of the evil spirit predator combined allowed even the taming of a Cerberus to be possible. Pant's chin naturally dropped, and as Muyoung chose a reward past the door, the arena started to collapse. Rumble. It meant that the trial of the arena had ended. Afterwards, as everything collapsed, the box of trial distorted and the original world became visible. What is that? He, who returned back to the original world, tilted her head as she looked up the sky. A particularly red star was in the sky. The combination of a few hundred or even a few thousand stars wouldn't have been brighter than that star. A totally pure star that shined as if it would swallow up everything. He, who was carried away by the purity, blankly stared at the star and then moved her gaze back to Myung. It was because the red star gave her a similar feeling to Myung for some reason. And He's thoughts were somewhat true. A red star that appeared in the highest place. That was the star of the Absolute. Chapter 84, 3 Pickaxe Sack Alliance, 1. TL, Yoni. Editor, Adji. A Cerberus was a top-ranked monster that could handle water, fire, and lightning. However, its opponent was bad. Death Knights were undead monsters that were acknowledged to have no rivals. It was comparable to a lich, and a well-made Death Knight was known to have the destructiveness of a dragon. To be exact, the evil spirit predator was not at that level. However, he was able to develop boundlessly and had the qualifications to be a sovereign. That meant, in some ways, the evil spirit predator was better. Even during the fight with the Cerberus, the evil spirit predator continued to get stronger. After a few hours of fighting, he was able to oppress it and designated it as a mount. Amazing! Myung never thought he would be able to tame a Cerberus. What he was half in doubt about became true. A Cerberus was quite lacking compared to a magical dragon, but it was still a top-ranked monster. Monsters that were very small in number but could change the flow of the battle were known as top-ranked monsters among the people. A Death Knight and now a Cerberus. A walking nuclear bomb was basically created. Starlight? Myung tilted his head. On top of his hand, a key that emitted a yellow light appeared. However, he had never heard of the present he received. As he concentrates on it, information about the key appeared. Name, Starlight. Rank, None. Classification, Functional Type. Endurance, None. Effect, a key that allows you to handle Starlight. Asterisk, depending on the star you possess, a different ability will be activated. Star of the Absolute, when it is up in the sky, you can declare Absolute's territory. Absolute's territory while the light is in reach, the enemies inside it are weakened. The toughness effect will be greatly reduced. Asterisk, depending on the number of stars you possess, the ability increases. Star of the Absolute, all stats plus 10. Asterisk, Star Looter Authority. When you suppress a star holder, you can forcefully steal the opponent's star. Myung's gaze didn't leave the key for a while. Starlight. Like the name, it was a word with endless possibilities. Stars are presents given only to special existences. There were other occasions where this happened. Heroes were those who were known to receive callings from stars. With the appearance of these people, a special star appear in the sky. From the appearance of a star, the people were able to know that a great existence had arisen. And Myung became one of those people. On top of that, he even had the authority to steal other stars. Of course, the star he talked about weren't only given to heroes. The star appeared as a symbol of those who were incomparable to others. If he could steal all the stars, the stolen star instantly became his power. Depending on the star, the ability differentiated so the starlight could be considered potential itself. The Queen of the Moon and the Star. She was different from the Masters of Darkness who have appeared until now. It was a name he saw for the first time. It meant the person wasn't actively participating in Myung's evaluation and, for some reason he didn't know of, suddenly decided to change their mind. Death Lord, Shadow Lord, the ruler of the afterlife, the Spirit Sovereign, the Star of 12 Zodiacs, King Slayer, and the Queen of the Moon and the Star. With this, Myung knew of 7 Masters of Darkness. The other 4 were still under a veil. Until when are you going to just stand there blankly? The evil spirit predator, who got on the Cerberus, spoke. Myung nodded before putting in the key. The thing Olonus continuously re-challenged and searched for is beyond that door. A total of 7 times. There was something he wanted to get even by participating in the arena 7 times. And Muyong was planning to find out what it was. Muyong moved and passed the huge door. He entered the huge door, but inside it, not a lot of things were seen. To be exact, there were only 3 books. And were written on each. I can only choose one from these. Muyong rubbed his chin. Normally, you could only choose one of these limited rewards. Probably something different would happen when he chooses one. There was no relationship with the order of the people who entered. Just one. He needed to be careful. Rewards that are given in the form of books are normally skills or treasure maps. He thought carefully. By looking at their titles, they didn't seem to be a skill. Then, would they be a treasure map? What Olonus wanted. There was a limit in knowing their titles. That was why he changed his focus to Olonus. Although he was a slave devil, it seemed like his sense of loyalty towards Vasago was still the same. On the other hand, since he had the pride of devils, he must have been sad that he had become a slave. He would have tried to be free from the slave status and, to do that, he needed to achieve something that would have been a direct help to the demon god Vasago. Call of the Devil. Muyong selected the book that was in the middle. His reason was simple. Angel of Retrogression. There are no angels in the underworld. History of Twilight? It was most likely to be a story about the elves that opened the Twilight era. There were stories about the underworld that he occasionally found when he looked through old books. This was also no different for humans and the demon gods. If there were at least some possibilities, it would only be the call of the devil. However, when he tried to open the book, it wouldn't budge. High-ranked devil, you say? From just these messages, he could tell that this item was uncommon. He was really curious about the content inside, but for now, he left it alone. Since he would meet a high-ranked devil one day. Muyong had become a lord who owned a territory in the demon god's territory. As he continued to increase his territory and strengthened his control, another devil around it would inevitably react to his territory. Krrrrung. Suddenly, the arena shook. The rest of the 2 novels disappeared as if they evaporated. As he looked around, cracks appeared on the rocks as they fell and turned to dust. At the same time, Muyong's body started to fade. When he opened his eyes again, he was outside of the box of trial. He returned back to the place where he first entered. However, there were things that definitely changed. First, the cave collapsed. To be exact, there was a pile of rocks. And the surrounding was filled with the presence of slaves. A surprising number of 2,000 slaves all stood there while they looked at Muyong with an odd expression. The evil spirit predator, who was riding on the Cerberus, looked at this scene with great interest. He was also someone who was trying to become a king. It was obvious he was interested in Muyong's actions as he wanted to be a sovereign in the current world and not the Azura path where he ordered the specters. A star, a real star, is in the sky. However, before handling them, he first looked at the sky. There was a particularly red star among the numerous stars in the black night sky. Muyong instinctively knew that that was his star. Muyong had killed a few who had their own star, but never did he ever earn a star for himself. Emotions he couldn't explain overflowed. Muyong considered this feeling as being moved or happiness. An emotion, that he never really felt and believed was already dead, was slowly surfacing. He shook his head before he looked around again. Follow me. We will go to my territory. And slowly, he started to move. There was no better place for all the different types of species to live in besides his own territory. While he was vacant, his territory developed astoundingly. 20,000 Dakibas were pioneering the territory and the humans were spreading seeds. In the underworld, most crops wouldn't grow. However, in Muyong's territory, they would grow as long as they gave them a good amount of water. Not too long after, a few messages appeared. B. a higher rank and a castle. It brought him to partake in his activities as a lord. As Muyeong stepped into his territory, the first to greet him was Baltan and Sahun. Both kneeled in front of him with determined eyes. "Dear please accept our fight." "Greetings, Lord." However, the Duoxini Sahun spoke in quite a worked-up voice while Baltan spoke in quite a calm voice. From the beginning, since Baltan was an undead, his emotions were swayed. However, he had determination. It was a fight with the pride of humans and Dakibus on the line. They were never going to be careless about it. However, Muyeong shook his head. "First, make space to receive them. The fight can start after." 2,000 slaves stood behind Muyeong. Elf, beast, dwarf, etc. Over 100 different species were gathered, but their conditions didn't seem to be all that great. They were suffering from malnutrition, all kinds of injuries, and filled with vague fear. They needed a place to receive them. "I will guide them. Follow me." Irene, who lightly walked towards them, stood in between Baltan and Sahun. While Baltan and Sahun didn't easily move as they were busy studying each other's face, Irene, who realized her exact role, stepped up. Unlike before, she smiled refreshingly and led the slaves. And Kalmu spoke as he saw numerous Dakibus from afar. "Is this my master's land?" "It is. There should be many things I need to do." Kalmu slightly smiled. He probably said it after looking at the buildings. There was enough work for the dwarves. Muyeong nodded as he walked forward. "After organizing the territory, I will go find the 3 Pickaxe Sack Alliance." He needed to do the things in the proper order. At the same time, the leaders of large organizations looked up in the sky. They focused on the particularly red star in the sky. An appearance of a new star always made everyone nervous. If they got it, the star would provide them with strength for them to leap up, and if they didn't, it would be a huge hindrance that would make them ground their teeth. The leaders of the large organizations all got up at the same time. "What is the name of that star?" Among the recruiters, there were some that studied stars. Large organizations would have at least one research lab, and they would study the existing stars to estimate the time the gates would open or when an unexpected situation would occur. There were some research labs that read signs that something would happen in 10 years from now, but they were not certain what that was yet. Anyhow, an appearance of a new star was also something they needed to study. And the name of the star could be easily figured out. The Star of the Absolute, that's what it's called. The Star of the Absolute. They could only knit their brows after hearing the title. How could a name be so arrogant? No one could discuss the Absolute. It was the same for those that were in the top 10 strongest human beings. The title of Absolute had that much weight. But, a star related to that title was up in the sky. Find it. Find who the owner of the star is. You must find it faster than anyone else. All the organizations, small or big, started to act. Their goal was one thing: to find the owner of the Star of the Absolute. However, no one could produce any results. It was an obvious thing. The place they were in was humanity's territory. How could they find Muyeong, who was increasing his influence in the demon god's territory? Chapter 85, 3 Pickaxe Sack Alliance, 2. TL, Yoni. Editor, Adji. It was impossible for different types of species to live harmoniously from the beginning. That was why it was necessary to divide areas and completely acknowledge each of their territories. Fortunately, the one who placed great influence on the others was Kalmu. He already knew different forms of buildings depending on the species and reconstructed them outstandingly. It took around 2 months for the open land to develop into territory-like form. It was truly a busy time where everyone had to rest in places with low walls. A castle of Muyeong was also built rather well. It was still incomparable to other castles in other large cities, but it was a place where the dwarf skills were beautifully displayed. The structure of the castle and its magnificence were incomparable to any other. Lords are people who rule over others. Muyong went up the top of the castle and looked down. Lord! Never in the world did he think that he would seriously ponder about this position. Even in the beginning, didn't he think of it as a position that he would just pass by? However, it was different now. Presently, there was a reason for him to widen his territory and become a great lord. Demon god of Gremory. I need to prove myself of that position. To go to the next step, he needed to develop his territory above a duchy. That meant, when his territory became so large that it would bother other demons with territories, a new problem would appear. And besides the qualifications of a demon king, Muyong's doubts increased. Demon gods' ecology and what happened before the great calamity. If he could just find out about them, he might be able to change the future. Dear Un, I think you need to come out for a second. Just then, Sahun ran with cold sweat running down his back. What's wrong? As Muyong asked, Sahun kneeled before he replied. Fire tars came down. Fire tars? Yes, it seems like when we were expanding our territory, we slightly trespassed their territory. If we continued like this, it seemed like there was going to be an all-out war. So fire tars were giants. They were top-ranked predators and were monsters that destroyed everything. If they crossed the territory of the fire tars, who were the main culprit of ecological destruction, things would not end easily. Fire tars are divided into tribes. Muyong thought of Augur. He was successful in solving the problem about the Pum tree and winning his favor, but the tribe Augur was the vice-chieftain of was located quite far from this place. That meant it was highly likely that another fire tar tribe was nearby. Muyong knitted his brows. Normal Dakibas were unable to win against the fire tars. It was the same even if Duoxinis were to face them. From the start, their chemistry was very bad. The fire tars were able to handle fire and, naturally, fires were a type of fear to living things. I understand. Muyong nodded his head and then turned his body. To somewhat settle the dispute, it seemed like he needed to move. A few thousand Dakibas felt their body trembling. Though he had actively hunted monsters and increased his territory up until now, no matter how great his numbers are, in front of the fire tars, they were like mice in front of cats. Only about 10 fire tars looked at the Dakibas with a frown on their face. There were already dead corpses of Dakibi rolling around. It seemed as if the fire tars had killed them to be set as examples of sinners. Muyong looked at the scene and inwardly clicked his tongue. It doesn't seem like their goal is to wipe everyone here. If that was their plan, they would have annihilated a few thousand Dakibas without mercy. Muyong knew very well that fire tars were cruel massacres. And as expected, they were fire tars he never saw. They were completely different tribe than the Augur he was familiar with. Are you the king of these Dakibas? Thump. Among the fire tars, the one that seemed to be the leader stood in front of Muyong. He tried to scare Muyong with his threatening footsteps, but Muyong didn't even budge. 1. He realistically calculated. He came to a conclusion that he could take one as a result. If a few thousand Dakibas assembled with Muyong and reinforcements arrived, there would be casualties, but it wasn't impossible to catch 10 fire tars. It meant he had nothing to lose. If the fire tars had a brain, they wouldn't try to have an all-out war. Most of all, since they killed Dakibas just as examples, they probably wanted something else. That's right. As Muyong nodded, the fire tar spoke. Your Dakibas trespassed our territory. Normally, it was our rule to kill them all, but we didn't. Do you know why? Are you wanting a deal? We seem to speak the same language. You're right. We know that you have developed this land and made a castle. Likewise, I want you to build a castle for us, fire tars. Then, I will let go of what has happened. Muyong inwardly snorted. The reason why they didn't invade and wanted another one built was because the walls and structure was too small for the fire tars. However, it was utter nonsense. Even with tens of thousands of Dakibas and everyone joined together, he didn't know how long it would take to build a castle the fire tars would be satisfied with. For them to ask him to complete it was no different from asking them to become their slaves. This is why dwarves hid underground. Dwarves were born to be experts in architecture. However, since their fighting power were terrible, they were used by all kinds of monsters and then died off. They could only live by hiding if they didn't want to be used by others. Likewise, it was like having flies come nearby wanting the castle Muyong had made. Fire tars liked to hunt but hated to build anything. Swoosh! Muyong took out Anguish and his wicked god's sword. I request for a duel. If you win, I will make you a castle, but, if I win, get lost. It was the most reasonable and rational way. The fire tars spoke noisily. They had never thought that he wouldn't back down and fight back like this. Since all Dakibas would feel fear against the fire tars. However, Muyong was an exception. All right. Daring fellow, I will make you regret it. One of the 10 fire tars, the one that seemed to be their leader, took out a huge spear from his back. Muyong shrugged his shoulders and faced the fire tar. This is fine. He knew a problem like this would happen eventually. It was impossible to ravage the demon god's territory with only 20,000 Dakibas. If it wasn't now, he would have faced a true predator in time. It would be easier to think that it has been moved forward. Although, it would have been impossible if it was the past. Muyong calmed himself. Compared to when he first arrived in the demon god's territory, his current strength was incomparable. Now, if he displayed his full strength, he could do something about one fire tar. Blazi. The fire tar burned his flames more intensely. Blaze. Muyong also activated his cry of fire as he grinned. Flames were bigger than fire tars. The fire tar's expression was solid. Muyong showed them that they weren't the only ones that could handle fire and really got on their nerves. On top of that, territory proclamation. The sky became slightly darker and from afar, a red star started to shine. There was no need to differentiate between night and day. Since the red star burned fiercely in the sky no matter if it was night or day. You use strange tricks. But, you still can't beat me. Clash. The spear dug up the ground. Muyong started to move by riding the spear shaft. It wasn't possible to win? That wasn't something he hadn't heard before, but the ones that said those words had all died by Muyong's hand. Thump. The fire tar's upper body fell to the floor. The fight settled after about 30 minutes later. Everyone's eyes widened. Without a distinction between fire tars and Dakibas. There was no Dakibi that could win against a fire tar, one-on-one. This was the same for Duoxinis. Dirum. Dirum. To the one that claimed the territory of the fire tars, the Dakibas felt a surge, kneeled, and idolized him further. Muyong, who didn't care what they were doing, went up to the fire tar who fell to the floor and placed Anguish by his neck before he spoke carefreely. The win has been decided. If you are going to continue, I will slice your neck like this. Kill me. I can't bear this humiliation. Pugh. Slash. There was no mercy. Muyong coldly stabbed the fire tar's neck and twisted it. He completely detached his head and then looked at the rest of the 9 fire tars. What are you going to do now? Are you going to take back on your promise? The fire tars looked at each other and discussed. In time, one of them nodded his head and took the head and the body of the dead fire tar. Like we promised, we will let you pass for today. Like you promised? I specifically told you to get lost. The fire tars didn't reply. Instead, they slowly backed away and made distance with Muyong. Then, Suhan approached. Now, all the Dakibas saw that fire tars are no longer an opponent to be feared upon. Please, allow me to track them down. Leave them. However, Muyong shook his head. Even if there were only 9, they were still equal to thousands of Dakibas. Neg. From afar, he heard a hoarse cry. It was the hell horse. If it was the hell horse, it could easily cook up 9 fire tars. However, he only had 2 chances left. He needed to use them more carefully, and even if he killed those 9 fire tars, it would not end there. Instead, it was best to prepare with the time on hand. They will invade sometime later on. The fire tars showed no signs that they were just going to back off. It was a big mistake to think of them as augur in the past. It was a mistake to think of them as warriors that knew of their honor. Only augur and his tribe were friendly. Of course, he wasn't planning to back away like this. Muyong's eyes sunk deeply. It was as expected. Exactly 4 days later, the fire tars invaded their territory and entered. Their numbers were exactly 50. Dakibas. I will give you one last chance. If you want to live, hand over your king. All 50 fire tars were holding a weapon. They had the strength to raise the territory. Narrow-minded bastards. Without a change in your facial color, you calmly speak a lie, hey. The Dakibas who faced them started to mumble with each other. Was a Dakibi of prophecy. Even if they were to be annihilated, there was no way they would pass over Muyong to the fire tars. However, it was also true that the results were clear. Even if 20,000 Dakibas gathered, they couldn't win against 50 fire tars. The fire tars were that much of a top predator. Muyong took out Anguish and Wicked God's sword and passed by these Dakibas. Dirum. You don't have to come forward. He is right. Leave this place to us. Muyong coldly spoke. Move. All the Dakibas closed their mouth after Muyong's word. However, it was necessary. Muyong could only stand up in this current situation. You voluntarily showed up. Do you change your mind now? It was probably the chieftain. A fire tar larger than other fire tars spoke to Muyong. I will give you one last chance. Get lost. Muyong replied calmly. The fire tar chieftain became furious. There is no victory for you guys. If you continue, you would only be massacred indiscriminately. I only let you guys live because I looked highly at your handcraftship. There is no victory. That's what I have to say. Muyong's expression didn't change. Afterwards, Muyong looked at afar and lifted up a side of his lips. You guys are greatly mistaken us. Do you think we just made up of Dakibas? What are you talking about? The chieftain was doubtful and spoke, but Muyong didn't reply. However, his gaze was still looking at afar. He could sense a trace of undead Baltan not too far from this place. Thump. 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 Soon, chieftain could understand the meaning behind Muyong's word. From afar, Baltan, Sahan, and a huge fire tar was running towards them. Muyong knew very well of the fire tar who was approaching them. Augur. Perhaps the only great warrior who knows of Muyong's true identity had appeared. Chapter 86. Muyong laughed quietly. He made Baltan and Sahan go to Augur and ask for his help, but there was honestly only a 50-50 chance. Compared to other fire tars, he was definitely someone who knew honor and friendship. However, since Augur had already helped him once, Muyong wasn't sure if he would help him a second time. However, Augur dropped whatever he was doing and ran to help Muyong. It seemed the help Muyong gave in solving the problem with the plum tree was still effective. Due to Augur who suddenly appeared, the expression of the fire tar chieftain could only harden. Stop the fight, Gram. After arriving at the battlefield, Augur took out his spear and spoke. Then, the fire tar chieftain called Gram looked at Augur and shook his head. Isn't it Augur, the vice chieftain of the Thornbush tribe? But, for what reason are you here? Your tribe has already moved from here quite a while ago. Gram squinted. As if he couldn't understand why on earth Augur would show up. However, it couldn't be helped. It wouldn't be easy to think that a fire tar, known to be a fire warrior, would come all the way here to help a mere Dakibi. Even more, Augur was the vice chieftain of a tribe. and he was the vice-chieftain of the strongest tribe near this area. Augur spoke briskly. The small Dakibi in front of you is our savior. Our savior. Graham's expression hardened even further. He said we not I. It meant that the entire Thornbush tribe regarded the one Dakibi as their savior. This was much harder for Graham to understand. Graham didn't know that Myung solved the chronic problem regarding the Pum tree. However, Augur wasn't planning on explaining step by step to help him understand. If you decide to persecute our savior, I will face you with my spear. Augur twirled his huge spear. The fire on his body moved to the spear and showed his gallant spirit to those all around him. It was much stronger than the flames of any other fire tars currently here. Still, he couldn't hastily move first. The Thornbush tribe was a huge group that monopolized the Pum tree. From the fire tar groups nearby, it could only be one that stood out the most. And among them, the vice-chieftain and the chieftain could easily fight against a top-ranked monster. The fire tars who surpassed the limits of fire tars. The high ranks and the top ranks difference was substantial. And even among the top rank, their difference was even greater. The top rank species were greatly divided into 5 stages, and Augur was definitely strong to be able to be in the 2N stage. It's the reason why others didn't trespass fire tars' territory. Fire tars were overall considered as high-rank monsters, but strong, top-ranked fire tars appeared from time to time that others didn't disturb them. Also, among the top class, if they surpassed the 5th stage, they were called the transcendental beings, but it was rare for a normal monster that wasn't a demon king or a demon god to be part of that group. Magical dragons with a name or legendary monsters might be part of the transcendental beings. It would be the same if they were to consider humans. Normally, they said top 10 humans were transcendental beings, but strictly saying, they were in the middle of transcendental beings and the 5th stage of the top rank. This was just a ranking system which humans made, and for this reason, it was understandable that they treated humans to be a higher rank than monsters. Either way, Augur was a strong individual included in the top rank, and if anyone was to fight with him, they would be harmed considerably. Augur, even though you are strong, do you think you could deal with all of us? However, Graham didn't fall back. It was also impossible for Augur to handle all 50 fire tars alone. It would be the same if he was to combine strength with Dakibus. On the contrary, he was about to explode. The veins in Graham's forehead and neck bulged. How much did they disregard him to send just Augur? It was at that moment. Myung coldly spoke as he smiled coldly. How long are you going to just watch? The situation is getting interesting. Thump. The evil spirit predator showed up, riding the Cerberus up above the sky. Originally, the Cerberus didn't have the ability to fly, but after the evil spirit predator added his authority to his ride, an ability it didn't have has been added. On both sides of Cerberus, the wings made out of evil spirit soared out. The Dakibus started to become noisy. That is, Cerberus. Why would that kind of monster show up all of a sudden? Why? The situation occurred as no Dakibi beside the slaves from the arena saw the evil spirit predator. As Cerberus approached, the sounds of murmur increased. However, the Cerberus didn't pose any action besides standing right beside Myung. Instead, the evil spirit predator who rode on top spoke. Myung, it is now okay to show my appearance, right? I called you because it was okay, you stupid. Shut up before I knit your lips, fairy. Gosh. Husband, did you hear him? This skeleton said he is going to knit Woohye's lips. Oh, my. How scary. Woohye, who quarreling with the evil spirit predator, quickly went up to Myung and flew around him. Afterwards, she hid behind Myung and stuck her tongue out to provoke the evil spirit predator. The evil spirit predator clicked his tongue and turned his head. Fairy. The Cerberus and the fairy follows our Dear During the time, the noise became greater and their spirit instantly rose. The fairy was known to only follow heroes. Even more, since another top-ranked monster was also with Myung, they couldn't be more reassured. For the slaves to adjust, I needed to hide the evil spirit predator. There was a simply reason why he hid Cerberus and the evil spirit predator. It was to make over 2,000 slaves adapt to the territory. It would take time for them to accept the Dakibus and the humans, but to add on top a monster like this, their confusion would only accelerate. That was why an appropriate amount of time was needed for them to naturally accept what was going on, but due to the Fire Tars invasion, that period of time had been moved up. However, it wasn't bad. Muyong spoke towards Graham. I wonder if you are assured of your victory even now. Graham, who was lost in words, moved his eyes and looked at the evil spirit predator. He knew right away that the evil spirit predator was a bigger problem than the Cerberus. The evil spirit predator was strong enough to face Augur. Graham's rate of victory of an all-out war dropped below half. Muyong also knew well of this. You kicked a warrior from our tribe. Graham spoke with difficulty. Then, Muyong scoffed at him. He and I had a proper duel. However, you guys didn't fulfill your promise. I definitely told you guys to get lost and leave my territory. Graham, what you did was no more and no less than an invasion. They didn't even have a cause. He was just being obstinate. But, Graham continued to play innocent. It is different from the story I heard. Didn't you first attack our warriors? At the same time, the Dakibus all backlashed. You, who is lost to all sense of shame. What nonsense are you speaking? Don't insult our A few thousand Dakibus saw it, as well as the heavens. He spoke a lie without even changing his expression. Graham spoke more calmly. Ruler of Dakibus. When there is no way to reduce the gaps of their difference of opinions, there is a very easy way to solve it. Would you listen to my suggestion? Are you talking about 1 versus 1 fight? You're correct. As we are both in the position of a ruler, we each place our worth equally and fight. There is no easier way than this. Scoff. Why must I do this? Muyong instantly replied. It seemed like Graham thought Muyong would accept the duel he suggested. However, Muyong seemed elated. Why would he go around when there was a clear way? Swoosh! Anguish and Wicked God's sword started to ring violently. Spectres came out and a strange cry was created. This is my land. The way we fight is decided upon me. Muyong was firm on his will. And right now, when Augur was willing to help, this was his golden opportunity. A chance to wipe out the Fire Tars who dominated the surrounding territory and to take control of it. There is going to be a loss, but he couldn't just let go of this chance. As Graham seemed urgent in his expression, Muyong raised his sword and quietly spoke. Wipe out all intruders who entered without my permission. The words of an intruder who had no cause were obvious. At least for this fight, Muyong had a cause. Since it was a king's duty to fight intruders and protect the land. After the appearance of Augur, the victory was already swaying towards Muyong. Including Graham, the 50 Fire Tars were all annihilated and Muyong devised a way to use these corpses. Of course, it should be refrained from the place Augur was at. However, Muyong had full authority over these corpses. After moving the corpses to a different place, he used the art of death skill. A combination of undead? Muyong recollected the dream he had about the Death Lord. At that time, the Death Lord mixed different corpses to produce an undead of a strange appearance. A different skill wasn't added but seemed like a subordinate art of death skill came up. I must combine it with the Prince and the Avengers. Muyong instantly remembered the other ghouls. If it was possible to strengthen it, he needed to take care of the Avengers first. They were all his comrades from the Forest of Death, but it was true that they were the ones that fell behind the most among the undead Muyong created. Reconstruction of death. It was Muyong's biggest strength to not hesitate. He instantly acted on what was on his mind. Soon, the soul floated above the Avengers and the Fire Ghoul's head. By the look of it, it seemed like it would be combined with a focus on the main undead. Without hesitation, Muyong chose the Avenger. This was because by simply looking at the fighting power, the fire ghouls was higher, but when thinking of its usefulness, the Avenger was the best. Crash! Afterwards, the Avengers and the fire ghoul's body were combined into one. Bones and skins were all starting to be recreated. And Weong was amazed by its final form. Level 131. Type Flame Mutant. Strength 145. Agility 137. Stamina 95. Intelligence 79. Wisdom 80. Dark Air Current 148. Fire Power 150. Magic Resistance 130. Infection Ability 90. Plus really high dark resistance. Plus can move quickly in darkness. Plus dark binding, shadow hide, critical damage, flood of fire, and mountain of fire skills are usable. Plus as the dark air current gets higher, it gets closer to darkness. Plus high resistance to fire. Plus it can get stronger by absorbing darkness and fire. Blazing Avenger. A doll that was completely black like shadows with soft flames above its head. The size was reduced, but when thinking of its usefulness this was much better. From the start, it was made into an undead out of a high-rank species, and since it wasn't in a good condition, this was the limit, but it wasn't bad at all. It gained the potential to develop and had both opposing aspects of darkness and fire. Decent. Weong nodded his head. He could say that he earned an undead that was greater than his expectations. The undead's overall fighting power has increased about 30%. Weong instantly made the undead into a talisman. Fortunately, since mutants were developing types of zombies, it was still able to get the effect of the prince and the Avengers. On top, even if their appearance has changed, it wasn't good for it to be seen by Augur. After managing the territory, I will go search for the 3 Pickaxe Sack Alliance. Weong squeezed his fist tightly. He planned to move after recovering from the aftermath of the battle. He couldn't just continue to leave the materials to rust. The heart of the phoenix, dragon bones, piece of the earth dragon's skin, fairy's wing powder, and even the night crystal. He couldn't wait to use these materials to make equipment. Chapter 87. It was a great battle they fought after creating the territory. It would be a lie if they said there was no damage. About 4,000 Dakibas died and about double the number suffered critical wounds. They acquired larger land, but they didn't have enough numbers to occupy the space. They couldn't be sure that a situation like this wouldn't happen again. He needed to make sure that defending troops were always on call. Even if they were to block trespassers as efficiently as they could, there was a limit with their current number. When Weong was planning to continue his thoughts, Augur came to him. Haha! Were you well until now? Thank you for helping. This is nothing. Since you are truly our savior. By the way. With half-closed eyes, he studied Weong and then tilted his head. As if you have decided, but haven't, it's uncertain. What are you talking about? Your true appearance? Weong nodded his head. When he last parted with Augur, Augur said, if we ever do meet again, that time make sure you know what you are. It was probably because he knew that Weong was a human. He was probably questioned since Weong had the appearance of a Dakibi. He meant for Weong to choose between a human or a Dakibi, but Weong didn't care. The star of absolute that floats in the sky is where Weong's purity lied. Is my appearance important? Weong firmly spoke. By looking at Weong's entrenched attitude, Augur's eyes shined. Augur thought that Weong would choose one or the other, but Weong gave an alternate answer. It was something even Augur didn't expect. You're right, appearance isn't important. Haha. Are you already enlightened to that point? It's truly a scary speed of development. Augur laughed outright. He was already treating Weong as his close friend. Besides thinking of him as his savior, he felt a sense of closeness to Weong, who was walking a lonely path of a warrior. Although it has only been a few months, Weong pioneered his own path. Although Augur, himself, had induced his awakening, but that just slightly opened up his possibilities. It was a good thing that I finished the work quietly. Myung secretly bagged the corpses of fire tars and made them into undead. Afterwards, he quickly made them into a talisman to hide their appearance. If Augur saw this, it would be hard to expect his current friendly attitude. Augur, could you protect my territory? What's more, Myung added another favor. The current situation of his territory was at its worst. Half of the Dakibas who were supposed to be working hard were unable to move due to this battle, so the gap was clearly visible. The territory just began to build structure and was still at the early stages. However, Myung couldn't continue to be tied up at the territory. He needed to at least make defenses before he left, but with just Baltan and a few undead, he was lacking. So, he concluded that he needed Augur's help. The territory? Where are you planning to go? That's right. However, the period of absence won't be long. This was no more than a measure of insurance just in case. However, since the fire tars disappeared, numerous monsters might come after and attack this place. Augur brushed his chin while he spoke. This is quite an interesting place. Although it is only a start, I have never seen different types of species living together in one place. Augur, if it wasn't for you, I would have denied all of this. Myung was certain. Since, the majority were negative about that many species being associated with each other. At least to Myung, who doesn't have a prejudice against them, something like this was possible. It would have also been impossible if they didn't join up under Myung's name. Grin. Augur showed his teeth. Myung, I like the way you do things. Although it is a way I have never seen until now and never thought of, but you have done it. I'm interested in what you will do and what you will achieve. Even when Myung thought of Augur once more, he really seemed like a strange fire tar. A species which no other monster could easily approach. Weren't fire tars the species that chose safety more than any other for that reason? However, Augur's mind was completely occupied by exploring new things. And Myung was chosen as the subject. Thump. Augur nailed his spear to the group and continued to talk. So I will protect his place until the 180th night. However, I cannot assure anything afterwards. I must return to my tribe when the Devil's Long Night starts. Devil's Long Night. It meant a period of time where devils were active in the demon god's territory. For a few months, endless nights continued and devils freely roamed. Normally they were weak devils that couldn't resist their instincts, but for the ones living in the demon god's territory, it was troublesome, and to prepare for the upcoming nights, it meant that Augur needed to return to his tribe. Myung nodded his head. That is enough. If anything, it was more than he expected. Since he was going to protect the territory during this risky period, it was obvious he needed to return during that time, and he also needed to find a way to strengthen his territory. The Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance will be my answer. He felt it was possible as long as he had someone who was originally part of the dwarves. Everyone acknowledged a dwarf's technical skills. Even more, the Dwarf Alliance, the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance, was in the top ranks. The lord at that place, Bartas the God's Hammer, was a dwarf who had the insight and the philosopher's knowledge. If Myung could earn his help, it was like earning the safety of his territory. Myung, but it doesn't seem like there is a house for me to stay in. Haha. Augur, who was blazing with flames and had the trunk of the pums tree tied to his waist, tapped his waist as he joked. Well, it was certain there wasn't a house for his size. I will try to have your house built first. As Myung spoke with a serious look, Augur cleared his throat. Ahem, it was a joke. Don't take it so seriously. I can just sleep using the sky as my blanket. Joke, he says. A tip of Myung's lips curled up. Augur considered Myung to be close enough that he could even toss a joke. Myung also felt this, but to be honest, it didn't really appeal to him. A close friend. It was because his concept of a friend was quite faint. For 40 years, Myung didn't have a friend. All the people who approached him had died. Were killed. Although he did take care of Kim Tae-won and B. Suzy momentarily, when he met them at the Blue Temple, it wasn't enough to say they were close friends. However, Augur was the only one who he could look at as a friend. Please, protect it well. Just as Myung spoke, Augur frowned. I like everything about you, but you are more boring than other fire tars. Since Myung was able to get Augur's promise, he was more free in his movements. He geared up right away. He was tight on time. Kalmu, do you know the location of the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance? Just to be sure and to double check, he asked Kalmu. The old dwarf, Kalmu looked sad as he shook his head. Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance always changes their location to avoid the eyes of dragons. Dwarves were good at finding and making treasures. It was obvious that they could only be the target of dragons that liked glittering things. No matter the type, dragons were the super powerful monsters that were at least on the second level of the top rank. And besides the demon kings and the demon gods, the one with the most numbers in the transcendent species were dragons. In the underworld, there weren't many fearless people who mingled with dragons, and if they did show interest in dragons, it was normally for an unpleasant reason. Also, for the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance's survival, they needed to routinely change their base. There must be big and small bases they continuously use. As Myung was certain, Kalmu drooled. There are 5, but that was a long time ago. I cannot be certain that my memory is correct. It doesn't matter. Where is the closest location from here? Kalmu was locked up in the underground arena for a long time. It wouldn't be weird if they changed those locations or increased them during that time. However, they would have habitually left a mark at those places, so that only particular people could recognize and understand the location where they moved. And Myung also had the skills to read those signs. It was also the basic knowledge of an assassin. It's a cliff called the Annan's Brain. Myung lightly clicked his tongue. It was a place he never heard of before. However, he didn't have any time to waste. To find the location, he needed to move even a second faster. It was, however, fortunate for the existence of the Cerberus. Since flight was possible, he could move at a much faster speed. Do I need to also ride it? Kalmu gulped his saliva as he became nervous. It was because getting on Cerberus's back was as fearful as getting inside a dragon's mouth. Let's get going. However, Myung was cold towards him. If you don't get on, you will be left behind. After realizing his meaning, Kalmu hurriedly yelled. Wait for me. In an awkward position, he grabbed hold of its hair and got on the Cerberus's back. Tap. After checking the last rider, the evil spirit predator slapped the sides of Cerberus with his legs. Then, wings made of evil spirits appeared on both sides of the Cerberus and it began to soar. Annan's Brain. Although Kalmu said it was a cliff, there were no cliffs to be found. Everything was horribly destroyed and only its remainings were rolling around. An empty hole was pierced into a mountain. As if something with enormous strength pierced through. There were no signs of lodgment. It seems like it was an act of a dragon. It seems like that even to me. Myung motionlessly looked at the mountain that lost half its figure while he had his arms crossed. The traces left after a dragon swept a place was a tragic disaster like this. Did it sweep the place since it couldn't find the location of the dwarves? Probably. Bartas knew how to make walls that dragons couldn't easily detect. Since it couldn't locate the place, it probably just blew up the entire place. However, it seems like it hasn't been long since it happened. Myung could only feel a bit strange by that part. By looking at the surrounding plants, it didn't seem long since the mountain was destroyed. At most, a month ago. Did they run away after being discovered, or was the mountain destroyed to vent its anger? It seemed like he needed to look around a bit more. Quiet. It was at that moment. The evil spirit predator spoke in a low voice. Kwa ha 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 hang. At the same time, a huge cry violently shook the entire mountain range. Kalmua shivered his body. Muyong also knitted his brows. A cry that instinctively stimulated people's fear. It was a dragon's cry. Soon, a huge existence appeared beyond the skies. A completely black figure with wings bigger than anyone else. Dark Dragon. It was a bit different than a magic dragon. Although the dark dragon was similar to a magic dragon, it was a dragon particularly known for its lack of patience. If you were caught, every bone in your body would be broken. It would be the same if he had Cerberus and the evil spirit predator with him. The further up you got in the top ranks, the difference became noticeably greater. For now, there was no way for Muyong to win against a dark dragon. Luckily, the dark dragon didn't stop and continued to roam above the sky. It was hurriedly headed towards some place. Pant! Pant! After it completely disappeared from their sight, Kalmua let out his breath. And he hurriedly spoke towards Muyong. Ah, it's the dark dragon Barca. Oh, no. Dark dragon Barca. The fiercest dragon that's after Bartas. Why is it in a place like this? Kalmua clenched his teeth. The dark dragon Barca that's after the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance. It seemed like it was the culprit that destroyed the mountain. It seemed like it was certain that this mountain was one of the places they resided, but for some reason it left this place. Dragons were known to have strong obsessions. And the dark dragons were more famous for not losing a prey they targeted. If Barca stayed for more than a month and decided to leave, the reason was obvious. I need to hurry. It located the next location the alliance might be at. Chapter 88, God Hand Bartas, 1. TL, Yoni. Editor, Iliadur. Muyong wrinkled his forehead and confirmed the direction Barca flew towards. There was a time when the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance had been greatly reduced in the past. God Hand Bartas, the lord of that place, was a dwarf who played an active role even 5 years from now. When the Sun Guild, Alexandro Quintart's guild, was roaming around the demon god's territory, they would find traces of him. Afterwards, many eye-widening equipment were released and the existence of Bartas came to light. However, even the Sun Guild and Alexandro were unable to keep Bartas in their grasp. They said there was a dragon attack. It was clearly the Dark Dragon. They were able to figure out Bartas's identity, but they were attacked by an unknown dragon. In the end, Bartas left them and the Sun Guild could only hastily fall back. It seemed like that dragon was Barca. Either way, Bartas had momentarily been under the Sun Guild's command and there were a few stories Muyong had heard back then. Amongst them, was a story about the size of the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance. It was a complaint about how they wouldn't have had to run away like now if they hadn't been so prideful and defended properly before the dragon seriously started to attack. And this story took place 5 years ago. And during that time Bartas overlooked the blacksmiths in the Sun Guild for a bit, but their skills rapidly rose during the short amount of time he stayed. There was a dominate review that if Bartas continued to stay with the Sun Guild, he would have been a game changer. After 5 years, when the influence and power changed as they started to pioneer in the demon god's territory, all the organization indiscriminately started to keep each other in check even once the great calamity occurred. In the turmoil where they could not see what was waiting for them, the equipment which God Hand Bartas left behind glistened more than others. Even, the blacksmiths who had been under the tutelage of Bartas for a short period of time shined brightly. If now, was a time before they were attacked by the dragon, so a time when the size wasn't reduced. There is an opportunity for me to interfere. Muyong rubbed his chin. He knew that the dark dragon Barca would continue to obsess over Bartas even 5 years later. If he could resolve this problem, he could easily earn the help of Bartas. However, it was impossible to face the dark dragon Barca in an all-out war. It would be the same even if the Cerberus, evil spirit predator, and the Hellhorse joined. However, if Bartas decided to help him, the results could change. Bartas is being too prideful. I need to break that pride and at the same time stop Barca. Bartas lived up to his name as God Hand and was very prideful. That was why he lost and had received an unrecoverable loss. Muyong stood still as he pondered before turning his head. Kalmu, do you know anything about Bartas? You mean God Hand Bartas? Well, if you're a dwarf, everyone knows him. With a puzzled look, Kalmu nodded. Tell me everything you know. Although they were in hurry, simply moving wasn't everything. Since he had a rough understanding of the current situation, he needed to devise a plan. Why would there be a saying, more haste, less speed? Muyong was careful. If he just interfered without much thought, he could lose everything. The opponent was the dark dragon Barca. Since Barca was in existence, Muyong couldn't make rash movements about. Not too long after Barca left, Muyong was able to find a sign. It was something that looked similar to a compass, and when he shook it a bit, it reacted. It seems like it was made to react to a dragon's magical powers. Muyong held the compass with his hand. It seemed like it didn't work since there were no dragons nearby. By looking at how it fiercely reacted when Barca was nearby, it is shaking at regular intervals. The compass was pointing towards the east. However, he couldn't just move by looking at that sign. This movement was a type of code. Muyong tried to interpret this slight shaking movement in different ways. He twisted his body after realizing that the signal changed as he changed the bearing. And he climbed up the Cerberus and told the direction. We will go north. What? But Barca is heading east. It's a trap. The alliance is north. Muyong was more than half certain that there were more of those compasses than just one. It was a type of trap in order to lure Barca. The shaking was pointing towards the north. Since it didn't react to the dragon's magical powers, it seemed like Barca moved by just looking at the arrows. He's completely arrogant. After solving the code to the compass, Muyong chuckled. Kalmu said that Bartas was his own lord throughout heaven and earth, and it was exactly as he stated. He didn't fear the dragon but rather enjoyed toying with it. If the dragon noticed that the magical powers of the compass were reacting strangely, it would be able to find the location of the alliance without a doubt. Look carefully if there are a group of monsters on our way there. The dark dragon Barca barked up the wrong tree. That meant he saved that much time. He still needed to hurry, but that didn't mean he could move without caution. Since he had figured out the location of the alliance, he now needed to lay out his bait. In order to make Bartas seek his dear help, it seemed like a little hardship was needed. The north side was a land full of snow. It was a place where the wind fiercely blew and the snowstorm raged. Of course, it was only natural that a lot of the monsters that were located here could only specialize in cold. Muyong got off at the center of icy roads and looked around for traces. It's the territory of ice trolls and the abominable snowman. The remaining footprints and the teeth marks on the corpses allowed Muyong to instantly find out what types of species lived in the surrounding area. On top, he was able to understand that the two were hostile towards each other. Food is scarce here. Especially the fish they get from this place is their main source of food. Piercing a hole through the ice and catching fish were both of their methods in getting their food. However, the lake wasn't that wide. Of course, they could only run into each other. Kalmu, I need you to become my bait. Bait? Kalmu tilted his head to the side after hearing Muyong's nonsense. As if Muyong expected it, he slowly explained it to him. I need your help in order to lure the ice troll and the abominable snowman. You're saying, my help? Yes. Just to be sure, Kalmu wanted to reconfirm with Muyong, but his will seemed firm. Kalmu closed his eyes and rubbed his beard. If you need my help, I would, of course, be of your assistance, but may I ask the reason? After finishing his son's revenge, Kalmu decided to be Muyong's slave himself. He even had the intentions to die if Muyong asked him to. However, he couldn't do anything about his curiosity. If the three Pickaxe Sack Alliance were somewhere around here, why didn't he try to find them right away but want him to be the bait for other monsters? Myung quietly turned his gaze and looked past the north side. I will attack Bartas. Did I hear something wrong? Kalmua's eyes greatly widened. To attack God Hand Bartas. Didn't Myung want to ask the three Pickaxe Sack Alliance for their help? There was no greater contradiction than this. However, Myung's expression didn't even change for the slightest bit. Bartas is completely wrapped up in his dignity. He ignores the dragons and toys with them. If the dark dragon Barca finds the alliance, it would be too late. Before then, we need to awaken his sense of alertness. It was true. Alertness. God Hand Bartas needed to be aware himself that he isn't perfect. Only then would he need Myung's help. If Myung approached him now, he wouldn't be able to earn everything he wanted. Since he had freed Kalmu, he might gain a favorable impression from Bartas. At most, Bartas would make an equipment with just the materials he brought. However, with just those, it wouldn't be enough. Myung desperately needed Bartas's help in order to prepare for the Devil's Long Night. For that, it was best to be in a position where he could help him first. However, from Kalmua's expression, it seemed like he still didn't understand. Can't we just approach Bartas and tell him the truth? There is only one chance. If he refuses, that would be the end. We need to make a situation where he can't refuse. Kalmu then understood. Kalmu was also already aware of God Hand Bartas's arrogance. He was famous for not changing his mind once he made his decision. Even if Myung told his story, what would he believe in and follow? Since Kalmu also spent a long time as a slave, he also didn't have right to speak. If anything, it would be fortunate if Bartas didn't think suspiciously of him. I understand. I will readily become bait. However, we probably need to find their location first. I have a place in mind. Already. If you read Bartas's personality, it isn't difficult. Myung calmly spoke. But, Kalmua's eyes were still with questions. He is quite the mysterious figure. He was like an onion. No matter how many times he was peeled, a new part appeared. Even so, Myung never failed when he acted with certainty. There was a reason to his every movement. Of course, there were times when his ways were to the extreme, but he always produced a result beyond expected. Who in the world would think to attack when they are going to ask for help? Kalmu inwardly shook his head before starting to speak. Then, we just need to decide how I'm going to be bait. I already have something in mind. Of course, you do. I will just follow. He most likely had not thought of a plan beforehand and instead, would have thought of it just now. However, Kalmu didn't have doubt him in the slightest and simply nodded his head. He was just a slave and followed him. And Myung was a wise owner. God Hand Bartas. The Lord of the Three Alliance and the ruler that ruled over 30,000 dwarves. Every dwarf trusted and followed him. Since that was the only way they could ensure their safety. The castle Bartas made had never allowed an invasion. Even if it was discovered, it would only quietly disappear. Bartas had the knack of knowing when the dragon would approach him and avoided it ahead of time. Although Bartas had the bearing of a tyrant, the reason why no one could show their discontent was the same as above. If they brought it up, they would be chased out of the castle. The dwarves who were chased out of the castle were quickly exposed to danger and died. So, they could only follow Bartas. However, that strength could only be expressed when the castle Bartas made had never allowed an invasion. Someone has touched the magic barrier of the castle walls. The wall has been exposed. Our base has been discovered. 2,000 ice trolls and abominable snowman are attacking the gate. The dwarves who went out to scout made a fuss as they approached Bartas. Bartas was sitting on a rocking chair inside his castle. A thick crown placed on his head and all sorts of accessories hung from his body. However, he couldn't get up after hearing the news. What? The wall has been exposed? Impossible. A high-level invisible spell was cast onto the wall. The wall was never exposed until now, since it was a spell which Bartas has invented and placed by using the weak points of every living creature. That was why the dragons couldn't even find their specific location and destroyed the surroundings. It is true. Come out and check. Bartas lifted his short legs and went out of the castle. And after seeing that the invisibility on the huge castle walls was lifted, he became dumbstruck. Thud. 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 Even more, since numerous monsters were knocking the castle wall, the confusion could only double. Who the hell? Chapter 89, God Hand Bartas, End. TL, Yoni. Editor, Lee Suras. When someone hid and there were no ways to immediately chase them down, it was the basics of tracking to analyze the person's usual behavior and personality. And Weong knew of God Hand Bartas's arrogance. There was a high chance that he didn't hide deep underground but in an unlikely place where it was in plain sight. After investigating a few suspicious places, there was an awkward location but nothing was visible. The snow reached high and vine-like plants were surrounding the place. If it wasn't for Weong, who was used to all the hidden traps, it wouldn't have been noticeable, but Weong was certain. There are perception-distorting magic and invisibility magic casted. Even if they entered the vines, they would still get lost. By just realizing this truth, Weong could go in the right direction. Weong had the directional awareness to be able to see through a simple distortion of his perception. When he entered deeper parts, he was able to feel a clear but hard wall. The problem was how he was going to reveal this transparent wall. Bartas has prepared all methods. A way to find and a way to lift the magic were all inside the compass. After awakening his pure state, he was able to instinctively detect the flow of magic, and he could tell that this flow of magic was different. And that different flow was completely opposite from the magical power he could feel from the compass. It seemed like if the two opposite flows were found, it would return to the original. So, he went around the invisible castle and tried to match the direction of the compass depending on the bearing. As expected. Then, the flow of magic that was slightly off course returned back to normal. Eventually, the huge and strong appearance of the castle slowly appeared. Bartas. He was truly an arrogant dwarf. He left the method openly as if allowing others to find him if they could. His skills were certainly great, but Weong knew this arrogance will hold him back. Right after the invisibility was removed, Weong prepared for the next step. It was the under-the-table work for Kalmu to become the bait and draw the ice trolls and the abominable snowmen. A medicine good for the body is normally bitter. It was a way for him to awaken Bartas's alertness. He hoped was that it wouldn't be too bitter that he would spit it out. The method for Kalmu to drag the ice trolls and the abominable snowman's attention was simple. By going in between the two who were fiercely fighting for the resources that were limited and stealing the resources that they were fighting for. I don't know why I have to partake in something like this. You need to run faster than that. Kalmu was running madly across the ice as fast as he could. Beside him, the evil spirit predator was using a great number of specters in order to hide his appearance and was helping Kalmu to run away easily. And Kalmu was holding a great big fish net full of fish. Without the help of the specters, it would have been impossible either way, but they were able to steal the food of the abominable snowmen and the ice trolls right in front of them. The ice trolls and the abominable snowmen could only see Kalmu. Kaya! They were chasing Kalmu with their neck veins bulging and screaming their lungs out. Of course, a few of the monsters were greatly influenced as they were possessed by specters, losing their conscience and going wild. Since when a few lose conscience and start to go wild, it would infect other monsters as well. It is crazy. Kalmu truly thought that, with his bare body, provoke about 2,000 monsters? It was truly something that not even a suicidal person could easily do. He would instantly disappear without a trace of a bone piece if he was to be caught by them. On top of that, as he was thinking that these crazily running monsters were intended to attack Bartas, he felt a slight guilt. However, it could not be undone. Kalmu clenched his teeth and ran. The result was the current situation. As 2,000 monsters were crazily knocking on the door, the huge castle gate shook violently. If the trolls and abominable snowmen were to combine their strengths, they were famous to display ogre-like strength. No matter how sturdy the castle walls were, if tens of ogres were knocking on the gate, it wouldn't be possible to stop them. If it continued like this, it was too obvious that the castle gates were going to be broken. He is responding late. Myung climbed up the exterior wall and looked around the surrounding. Although there were traps, magic, and etc. prepared for intruders, they couldn't fool Myung's eyes. There was always a gap in between them, and Myung was like a fish in the water and walked leisurely in between them. If it continues like this, the gate might break. They say that the numbers are greater than 2,000. The dwarves were greatly taken aback and weren't able to easily make the next move to deal with the situation. They only thought of a way to escape in case of a dragon's attack, and never in the world thought that the castle would be found by normal monsters and would be invaded by them. Sheeps without a shepherd. It was a thought that naturally occurred. What was the point of having strong, sturdy castle walls? What could thousands of dwarves do when they are grouped together? This happened because they only believed in their wall and neglected other ways to deal with the situation. And in the middle of this was Bartas. He could tell just by looking at the inner parts of the wall. As Bartas reigned as the lord of the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance, it seemed like he used other dwarves as his slaves. Besides the castle, all other buildings were very poor, unlike the dwarves to dwell in. What should we do? Let's go to Bartas. If it is Bartas, he will give us the answer. It didn't seem like there was a guideline for the confused dwarves. Their trust only in Bartas's insight, and their reliance on him appeared in numerous conversations. If enemies appear, they should instantly put on their armor and raise their swords to stop the gate from opening. Like the time when the Dakibas confronted the fire tars, even that wasn't enough to keep them in check in order to prevent them from coming in further. But, the dwarves first started to gather inside the castle. There were no dwarves who made an arbitrary decision to arm themselves. It was probably because Bartas was that great, but from how they managed this, Myung could only be disappointed. True slaves don't even know that they are slaves themselves. By looking at the dwarves who couldn't do anything without Bartas's orders, Myung couldn't help but have this thought. However, it wasn't the time yet to cut them off. Myung entered the castle and started to move. We are much greater in number. Even though the transparency of the wall has been removed, those are no greater than coincidence. There are no reasons to fear if it isn't a dragon. A dwarf with his crown placed on his head and all sorts of accessories hung from his body was presenting a speech in front of the castle. Myung could tell right away. That dwarf was Bartas. "Co, could we fight against trolls? There aren't many dwarves that know how to fight. They only know how to blow the bellows." The dwarves were still frightened. It was something they had never experienced before. Myung waited for Bartas's reaction. It was an embarrassment to run away from just 2,000 monsters and not a dragon. As a lord, his face would be lost. Finally, Bartas took out his sword. "The weapons we have created can even rip apart an ogre's body. What are you worried about? Raise your weapons. Now is the time to show the true strength of dwarves." As expected, Bartas chose to fight. Dwarves weren't a physically strong species. However, the equipment they have made could close the gap of their physical difference. Bartas's next move didn't seem that bad. By choosing just the ones who knew how to fight, he protected the gate. They shot arrows and huge crossbows. There were also items that were similar to cannons. And by operating a detached force, he made them sneak out the back gate and attack the backs of the surviving monsters. The tactical strategy itself isn't bad. After fighting for more than half a day, they were able to massacre 2,000 monsters. It didn't seem like Bartas was a good lord just by appearance. All the dwarves were carried away by their triumph. However, would they know that this wasn't the end of it? That it hasn't even properly began. After the fight, Bartas placed the transparent spell on the wall and inspected the security. However, before he could even figure out the main cause, the next attack started. It was because few hundreds of orcs with blue leather found the castle. Moon Orc. Bartas could only turn pale after looking at the orcs. The Moon Orcs should be a species that live quite far to the north from here. It was hard to understand why the Moon Orcs would suddenly head towards the castle. Even more, the transparency had once again been broken. It was never broken naturally. Someone is continuously removing the security. Bartas was dripping cold sweat. They also defended against the Moon Orcs, but now before they could even recover, numerous werewolves appeared. We will all die. Like this, there is no hope. The dwarves couldn't even sleep properly. They were slowly being encroached by fear. Still, Bartas couldn't make a decision easily. Is it waiting for us to come out of the castle and run away? It wouldn't be a dragon, but who could it be? The biggest problem was he had no way of figuring out who the opponent was and what his intentions were in removing their security. If it was a dragon, it wouldn't use a complicated method like this. If it knew how to remove it, it could have just done that. Bartas used his head. Either way, he couldn't be just toyed by the opponent's intentions. However, the number and the species of the monsters that were invading were just the amounts for them to continuously defend. It was awkward to run away and awkward to continuously defend. Hence, it was odd, but he didn't have time to think deeply. In the end, Bartas's wisdom was starting to break down due to the endless wave of monsters. This happened because of the continuous battle he wasn't used to. As he postponed his decision a few times within the castle, he didn't concern about the fighting spirit of the dwarves at all. Thump! At last, the castle gate broke. After a full 15 days, the monster that appeared was staggering twin-head ogre. Although it had 2 heads, it was the monster of the monsters that could exhibit the strength of 20 ogres. The twin-head ogre. Run, we need to run. The eyes of the dwarves were full of despair. Clank! There were even dwarves that dropped their weapon. What should we do? Even Bartas was taken back. However, it was already too late. The twin-head ogre entered the castle and was massacring the dwarves. The only way was for them to run away. To prepare for the attack of the dragon, didn't they prepare a few ways to leave the castle? I will escape the castle. All of you stop the twin-head ogre. As Lord Bartas retreated, the fighting spirit of the dwarves reached rock bottom. It was when all the dwarves' eyes were filled with despair. Blaze! A Dakibi appeared as he sliced an arm of the twin-head ogre. Kaya! The twin-head ogre held its sliced-off arm and went insane. For a moment, the Dakibi turned his head and talked to the dwarves that were stepping back. The twin-head ogre is weak against fire. We can catch it if we pour gunpowder on it. However, the dwarves couldn't easily move. So, the Dakibi suddenly cried out. Are there only dwarf cowards? Heimdall will weep. Heimdall. The name of the god the dwarves worshipped. Thud. After listening to his words, Bartas stopped his movement. The Dakibi was obviously Mweung. Mweung inwardly smiled after looking at Bartas. God hand Bartas. The dwarf with insight and knowledge, but was completely arrogant due to his skills greater than any of the other dwarves. Nonetheless, in the end, Mweung knew he was still a coward. However, he wouldn't have always been a coward. If he is just a coward, he couldn't have become a lord. And Mweung's thoughts were exactly right. Bartas, who was running away, stopped, and shook his body. He was devoted to Heimdall more than anyone else. How dare a Dakibi talk about us? The emotions he had suppressed until now had bursted out. Chapter 90, Immortal King's Armor, 1. TL, Yoni. Editor, Lee Suris. Mweung shrugged his shoulders and held Anguish and Wicked God's sword. If Bartas was to start acting again, it was now time to deal with the monster in front of him. It was most difficult to lure you. The twin-head ogre was a mutant. They were different from the albino mutants called Ark, but he could say that they were the top of all ogres. Normally, they were active as the owners of the harsh land or high summits, but Muyong did whatever he could to lure them. He made traps, destroyed all its surrounding food, made it starve, and then afterwards disturbed it. He even used 6 out of the 15 days of attacking the dwarf's castle to lure him. It was because he needed its monstrous power to break the gate. Grr. Afterwards, the arm of the twin-head ogre started to regenerate. Its strength wasn't just 20 times of a normal ogre, but even his regenerating abilities was also 20 times. A level where this injury was akin to slapping the troll's cheek or gently stepping on it. In simple free-for-all fight, he could say twin-head ogre was the strongest. 1 versus 1? Without being crazy, there was no way Muyong would take a chance like that. Crack! Crack! The dwarves fired their crossbows and shot a cannon charged with gunpowder. Since they were species who developed mines and mined them, it was obvious that they could handle gunpowder. However, they were ridiculously short on firepower. The twin-head ogre's skin didn't even burn from the mediocre gunpowder explosion. It would be hard to get more backup than this. The place was the reason. They couldn't just explode an unlimited supply of gunpowder inside the castle. If they weren't thinking of dying altogether, this would be all the fire powder they could use. It's better that way. From the beginning, he didn't really have high hopes. The more their helplessness is proven, it would be used as a good opportunity for him. And if more than consistent attacks overlapped, its defensive power and its regeneration power would all become useless. Thump! Thud! However, the twin-head ogre didn't even give him time to think. It raised its fist and pushed right where Muyong was standing. Muyong barely blocked it, but his body bounced off afar. The speed was also out of the ordinary, and if he was even slightly late to react, his whole body would have turned into dust. Pug! Muyong spit out blood mixed with dirt. It seemed like his left arm was out of joint. Crack! Crackle! After forcefully pushing his joint back into place, he looked at the twin-head ogre that was running towards him, proclaiming territory. As he mumbled quietly, the surrounding air and the pressure of magic changed. A wide absolute's territory was spread out with Muyong in the middle. A territory-wide authority that weakened individuals prescribed as an enemy and increased Muyong's presence. Swoosh! The moment Muyong lifted his foot, he was behind the twin-head ogre. In a moment of acceleration, Muyong simultaneously pierced 3 acupunctural points. Acupunctural points were the energy pathways of a living body. As the twin-head ogre was also a living being, there could only be pathways where energy flows through. Even though those places might be different, Muyong was considered to be an expert, better than anyone else at killing a living being. Not just humans, but he had already dissected a few thousand, no, a few tens of thousands of monsters. Exactly 3 seconds. After the acceleration ended, the ogre's calf, in between its ribs, and behind its head started to bleed all at once. However, it couldn't recover as fast as it could in the past. Recovery means to restore your energy back to normal. Your recovery will obviously slow down if your veins are blocked. Then, Muyong looked down at his hands. To pierce through its extremely tough flesh, his hands were wrecked. It was because the returning damage doubled when acceleration was added. At least his bones weren't damaged. Kaya! Both heads were both releasing their fury. Muyong hastily dodged with his body, but all the surrounding buildings collapsed by a touch of the ogre's monstrous power. Thump! However, the twin-head ogre sat down in its spot. It seemed like the calf Muyong sliced off was quite a blow. Muyong wasn't the type to lose a chance like this. By climbing up a side of a building and going around it quickly, he confused the twin-head ogre's gaze and quickly jumped on it. Stab! Like a hawk snatching its prey, he held Anguish with both his hands and turned his body once before stabbing the ogre's eye. Kaya! The head with its eye stabbed started to go completely insane. No matter how tough its skin was, the eye tissues could only be thin. Hub. The problem was his fit of raving was rougher than what he thought. Just by grazing, Muyoung's body was floating in the air. Miv. He barely landed on the ground, but his ribs were completely busted. That moment, the dark aura started to stretch out from Muyoung's entire body. It was the lunatic warrior effect which was activated when his life was at risk. However, if there was something that changed from the past, it was that the star of the Absolute reacted. Normally, the lunatic warrior had an effect of using up stamina, but it was because the surrounding red territory was being absorbed into Muyoung's body that the injuries were being cured. Muyoung smiled after spitting out blood. Activation of the lunatic warrior after just grazing twice. If he simply looked at physical stats, the twin-head ogre would be within the highest rank among the top-ranked monsters. Although its overall stats were low and it was in the high rank, for now, it was too much for Muyoung to fight. The figures don't balance. There wouldn't be a worst exchange rate besides this. Like this, if he was to allow another attack, his body wouldn't be able to handle it. On the other hand, the twin-head ogre was in a decent shape compared to Muyoung. Although he lost sight of one eye, he still had 3 more. It was a worthy monster to be called the strongest in 1 versus 1 fights. However, that was only when it was a 1 versus 1 fight. Tack in! Muyoung screamed towards the sky. Thump! At the same time, Cerberus fell from the sky. At last, you call my name. With his black cape fluttering, the evil spirit predator came down to the ground. Although its flesh was rotten and was now only left with bones, its aura overwhelmed the surroundings. Tack in! It was the real name of the evil spirit predator. After Muyoung called Taken, as if it was nothing, he started to create injuries around his ribs to remove his festered blood. While Cerberus was taking care of the twin-head ogre, Taken spoke as he was lost for words about the scene. But, are you truly a Dakibi? Although I am the owner of numerous specters, I have never met someone this determined as you in my lifetime. How can you treat that sort of wound on yourself without changing an expression? Taken was truly overwhelmed. There were no specters that weren't determined. However, among a few thousands of specters, there were no one as determined as Muyoung. Like when Muyoung pushed himself almost to his death and called for him. Muyoung tossed a chilly gaze and spoke. We need to minimize the damage while gaining control over it. Tisk tisk, I understand. Just trust me. No matter how strong it is, he is not an opponent for me, the evil spirit predator. Taken stepped forward, full of confidence. He was going to win it on a 1 versus 1 fight, something which Muyoung couldn't do. As the Cerberus stepped aside, Taken was next. The specters overlapped his sword and black flames rose. He ran straight towards twin-head ogre and faced it face to face. Thump! Taken's sword pierced through its chest, but he had bounced off far away and was shoved against a wall. Taken got up from the collapsed building and spoke as he became embarrassed. I think some surrounding buildings will collapse. By the look of it, it seemed like it was going to be hard for Taken alone to minimize the damage. Just in time, Muyoung was now ready to move a bit. Muyoung stepped forwards and started to talk. 2 of us will stop him. Taken turned his head. You're telling me to do something like that? That's most effective. However, Muyoung wasn't willing to accept Taken's complaint at all. There was a high chance that he would only leave a bad impression to Bartas if he was to burn down the place. Muyoung going out alone in the beginning to fight and his efforts on trying to reduce the damages were all nothing more than a sort of a show. A plan to make Bartas feel helpless and then to make him ask for his help. Although it is his final goal to find a solution to Dark Dragon Barca together, if the infrastructure crumbles, it would be reversed. Swoosh! With the strong wind, Muyoung ran like the storm. Although he didn't fully recover, he was burning his last bit of flames left. Taken shook his head. He's quite a monster. Dwarves didn't even dare to approach the twin-head ogre. Even if they poured gunpowder from afar, it was a situation where they couldn't even make a dent on it. For the dwarves who were completely exhausted to stand up to the twin-head ogre, the wall was too high. Were the dwarves this weak? No. Bartas shook his head. There were many valiant dwarf warriors. Just, as they lived a life quite far from the battle for a long time, they just became weak. It was obvious for them to lose their bravery since they always ran away from the dragon. Thud. Thud. Bartas's eyes touched the two figures who were fighting violently. The Dakibi and the Death Knight. There wasn't any other combination that clashed more. Even more, although the Dakibi had serious injuries that could kill him, he didn't stop to rest but continued to run towards it. Even though he was like a reckless tiger moth, his bravery must be recognized. The thing we lost, that Dakibi has. It thrilled Bartas. It has been too long since he had seen a warrior fight like that. While it was so long that he couldn't even remember, there were dwarves who could fight like the Dakibi. Although they were the first to die by the dragon, and none were left. He didn't think the bravery would be reminded by the Dakibi. Thud. At last, both heads of the twin-head ogre were sliced off and it fell to the ground. The Dakibi and the Death Knight both sliced one off each. It was a greatly satisfying victory. Who are you guys? Bartas couldn't help but ask. Either way, it was true that he did get their help. Bartas wasn't that lost to all sense of shame to ignore them. However, the Dakibi didn't even glance at Bartas. He was lost in thought as he collected the twin-head ogre's heads and rubbed his cheek. Is he ignoring me? Bartas's express was clouded with anger. For someone who was respected as God Hand, it has been a while for someone to give him this kind of humiliation. Even when Weong mentioned Heimdall, he got on his nerves, but he was now publicly ignoring to see him. It was at that moment. The Lord of the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance, God Hand Bartas. The top blacksmith of the Golden Hammer tribe Kalmu greets you. Kalmu, who hurriedly ran towards Bartas, kneeled in front of him. Then, Bartas's expression changed. Kalmu. I have heard of you before. There was an exchange with the Golden Hammer tribe not too long ago. Please, excuse my owner's rudeness. It is because when he focuses on something, he just can't focus on anything else. Owner? Are you saying that towards the Dakibi? Once again, Bartas's expression contorted. Dwarves were especially sensitive to the word slave. As there were many species that were greedy over their special skills in handling iron. Then, Kalmu explained. I have been locked up in the underground arena with my son. However, my son was killed by a devil and the person who avenged him for me was my current owner. Please do not reprove him as it was something I decided for myself. My owner wants to become a help to God Hand Bartas. It was the reason why he quickly ran here after realizing that the twin-head ogre came close to this place. Thump. The Dakibi, Weong, stood beside Kalmu. If there was anything strange, it was that while he was looking elsewhere, the twin-head ogre's heads vanished into thin air. And on Weong's necklace, a smaller version of the twin-head ogre's head was hanging. I am Weong. I have watched well of the dwarfs fight. I have heard that Heimdall was a battle god which dwarves served, indeed it was true. After a short introduction, he continued to flatter him. Bartas could feel his cheeks glowing. Fight? Could it even be called a fight? It was better said to call it a joke. In the end, wasn't it the Dakibi and Death Knight who handled the twin-head ogre? On the contrary, they dishonored the battle god Heimdall. Cough. However, since Weong had singled out that part and flattered him about it, he had nothing to say. Then, Kalmu spoke again. Bartas, this isn't the time to share words. Barca is coming. Dark Dragon Barca? It wouldn't find this place. Kalmu fiercely shook his head. No. Barca already found this place. Only, it changed its strategy. Didn't monsters invade this place for a few days and not just today? That is true, but you're saying they are the acts of Barca. Yes, Barca is behind all of this and was controlling the monsters. If you don't take action, you will suffer. 20 days ago, we had seen Barca fly towards the north. We even reached this place from following Barca. Bartas slightly knitted his brows. Barca, that was known to have no patience, destroyed their protecting wall and called the monsters? He couldn't easily believe him but didn't think that Kalmo would lie. There was no reason for him to. If he saw it 20 days ago and came to this place, the timing was also roughly right. We need to change our location. Bartas carefully made a conclusion. However, without any preparation, it was impossible to face the dark dragon. However, Kalmo was still pessimistic. It's too late. Barca is currently enjoying blockading this place while it sees a decline in dwarf numbers. It probably knew you were going to run away. Do you think it didn't make plans for it? That was also true. Bartas squeezed his brows. Dragons had high intelligence. To get back at all his suffering, it might be playing with them. Before Bartas could get lost in his thoughts, Kalmo made an offer. We will help. Let us help you. How? Although the Dakibi and that Death Knight seem quite strong, the strength of dragons is on another level. Then, Muyong stepped forward. I have the heart of the phoenix, dragon bones, and a piece of the earth dragon's skin. Make me an armor that can withstand the dragon's attack. Using the heart of the phoenix to make an armor. Don't you have the demon dragon lethal cannon? The cannon that can give a sufficient blow to the dragon. If I buy some time, you should have enough time to blast a shot at it. How did you? Bartas could not repress his astonishment.